Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today, I share the story of Tamara Monroe. Tamara was successfully thriving in a traditional marketing role, but decided to give that all up to follow her dreams. Tamara now owns and runs Lovebirds Donuts, a vegan donut and coffee shop in Maine. Here's Tamara's transformative story. First of all, thank you so much for being here, Tamara, on Plant Your Seed.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Sure. Now, I've given our listeners a little piece of your plant-based story. Mm-hmm. Can you give us an overview of your personal journey to a plant-based diet?
Yeah, sure. So I started eating vegetarian when I got into high school. I was never really, even as a little kid, on board with the whole eating animals thing. It just never sat right with me. I was never very meat-focused, even as a kid. And then when I sort of got to an age of figuring things out for myself, I just kind of gave it up. And I was vegetarian throughout high school. I sort of backslid a little bit in college and then got back on track, so to speak, and I went back to a vegetarian diet for, probably another 10 years or so. And then, over time, I sort of started just, exploring a vegan diet and what that meant. And it seemed to really align with my personal belief system and just how I thought that, things should be. And I just felt like I needed to exemplify that in my diet and lifestyle. And then about 4 years ago, I decided to, just go for it. And I never looked back. I think it was the best decision I ever made for my diet. I just feel very aligned with it. I feel healthier. I feel like, I'm making real impacts in other ways, like with the environment and just with sustainability and that sort of thing. So it's probably one of the best decisions I've made in my life.
Why did you become plant-based?
So I decided to become plant-based because of my feelings on just eating animals in general. That was sort of what inspired me to go vegetarian in the first place. And then as, I started researching more and just learning more over the years about the dairy industry and the egg industry, I just decided that, all parts of my diet needed to be more conscientious of our exploitation of animals. So that was the lead decision. And then, secondary decisions are for environmental health and then personal health as well. So.
Okay, so that was about 4 years ago?
That was about 4 years ago, yeah, just under 4 years.
Okay, and so what was the trigger? I mean, I know for me, I watched some documentaries and stuff like that in order to kind of educate myself and then make my decision. Was there anything like that for you, or was it just over time?
Yeah, it really wasn't. I know that there are a lot of vegans who saw, Cowspiracy or another documentary that just really just did it for them. That was it. And they never looked back. For me, it was a more gradual change, at least internally, in how I was thinking about things. I had some friends who were vegan, some coworkers, and I just sort of watched them. And it was something I think like a lot of people at first weren't familiar with it, thinking like it's an impossible lifestyle. It's got to be very hard. And I think I had some of that bias as well, even though I was a vegetarian. And as I learned more and realized it's really not that hard and it's, it could be a really great lifestyle, I just sort of decided one day that I was going to do it. I put a date on the calendar, like for 8 weeks out, just so I could really mentally prepare for it, and then I did it.
What was that date?
So I did it right before the holidays. It was whatever the year was, a few years back, and it was about December. So it was right in the middle of the holiday season, which is a crazy time to sort of make any type of dietary change, of course. But I think I did it because I also, for me, the biggest challenge was, family and friends and what would they think, and, those social engagements. And you always I didn't have, like my family, there are no vegans in my family, so I was going to be the first person to kind of make that switch. I wasn't sure how receptive people would be to it, so I just sort of primed them during those holidays, and I was sort of dabbling, and then I said, right after the holidays, that was going to be it for me. So,
right now, is anybody in your family? Did you have anybody to kind of be on your side? You know what I mean, as far as your mom or your dad or anybody like that, or were you just solo?
Yeah, so I did, because my mother and my sister are also vegetarian. So we grew up in a very veg-focused household. So that was never something that was really foreign to them. And so when I decided to, go the extra step and go fully vegan, they got it. They totally understood, and they're supportive and have been ever since.
Oh, that's nice. It's nice to have some kind of support staff there with you.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, was there any time that you realized that a plant-based diet or a vegan diet was something that just made you feel better? Was there a particular instance?
So from a health perspective, being that it wasn't the primary reason or even the secondary reason I was doing it, it wasn't something that I heavily focused on at first. But then I did realize that after, the first couple of months or so, anytime you switch a diet, there's always going to be a little bit of a transition period to your whole system. And then after that point, I was realizing that I was just feeling overall better. I felt like all my systems were running well, so to speak. I wasn't getting certain types of, heartburn or indigestion I was getting before. Everything just seemed to be running really well. And even though I have a cold right now, I noticed that I wasn't getting colds as frequently. I was a person who was getting a cold every season. And now it's much, much less frequent. And I can't explain the science as to why that could be related, but it's just something that I've noticed as a correlation. So, and little things like that. So in general, I just found that I just feel like my body is just running more efficiently, and that as a result, some of these things like colds and even just small day-to-day ailments are just not as prevalent.
Right. No, I agree. That I find that as well.
It was kind of weird for a while. I didn't get a cold for about 2 years, which was extremely unusual for me. And I was will I ever get one again? And of course I did. And now I work very much with the public, much more so than I used to before my husband and I opened this donut shop. So I'm around a lot of people now, much more susceptible. But beforehand, I wasn't really getting them.
Now, you mentioned earlier about people thinking that it was a little difficult or hard to do. Why do you think that people have that perception?
I think in a way, anything that's sort of outside of the mainstream, people perceive as maybe harder or different, or maybe it's even something that they haven't given a lot of thought to. And then when you hear things from people who have certain biases, you just sort of adopt them as your own. So, I think for sure, taking on a plant-based diet is more challenging because everywhere you go, especially with the standard American diet, you have certain ingredients, and most of those, or a majority of those, are animal-based. So you just sort of get used to that, and then the things that you learn to like and the things that you find comforting are the things that become traditional in your household contain animal products. So it's hard to imagine your life without those things, or you equate it to not having those comforts or not having those splurges or having those traditions. But then, when you kind of step out and start exploring it, you're like, oh, okay, well, it's just making some tweaks, or I can still have all these things, because we've had such advances in plant-based eating commercially. So once you actually put yourself in that space and you've kind of forced yourself to explore it, you realize it doesn't actually have to be that different, or it doesn't have to be that hard.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm sure you guys have great breakfasts and everything, but I know that. I mean, we make waffles and pancakes and muffins and all of that stuff. So I don't feel like we're losing anything. If anything, I feel just the opposite. We've gained so much more.
Yeah, I often feel that way too. In some ways, I sort of wish it was like being a vegan 20 years ago, where I'd be forced to just eat, fruits and veggies all day, and I'd probably be a much healthier type of person. But I just, there's so much available now, so many really good things, and there's nothing from my previous life, so to speak, that I don't get to eat now, just in a plant-based version. So. Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I like to cook, and I find that the challenge of taking something that is commonly, animal-based or uses a lot of animal products, or just something that I really like, and then veganizing it is super fun, like just learning the science behind it and how food works. So my cooking game has gone up, and I enjoy it even more.
No, I agree. I love veganizing things. What is your favorite thing, or what is one of your favorite things that you veganized?
So I like to take things that are really traditionally not vegan, or people would think could not be vegan. So I think one that I was really surprised at that was really good is I learned how to make sort of like a clam chowder, like a New England clam chowder, using, mushrooms in lieu of the clams for that texture. And I like to put corn and potatoes in there as well. And then creating like a creamy, just really satisfying and rich, chowder base for that, entirely out of, plant-based items and ingredients. And it's not even an overly complicated recipe. I don't personally like to cook with a lot of, I don't know, you call them like strange or foreign ingredients in terms of gums and things like that. A lot of vegan recipes have a lot of those additives to try to replicate. I try to do it as simply as possible using just like real food items. And I think it ends up having a much more successful and sort of approachable result. So that I'll make sometimes, when the weather's cold or I just want some comfort food, and it's just really tasty.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let's just move on to how you guys decided to go and change your whole careers. I read something where you guys were in San Diego and then moved to Boston, and so you're in Boston. And
yep.
How does that come about? How do you guys decide to go and say, "Hey, this is what we want to do. Let's just go for it"?
Yeah. So while we were in Boston, we had very different careers, like you said. So my husband was in finance and accounting, and I have been in marketing my whole career. So, those are very different sort of backgrounds than what we're exploring right now. And my husband, he was also in the brewing industry. So he ran a brewery for a couple of years and did a lot of hobby brewing on his own. He did home brewing, and he was in competitions. He took it really seriously and learned a lot about the science of fermentation. And that sort of led to a hobby in bread making for him, like traditional bread making, sourdoughs, that sort of thing. So he was doing that pretty seriously at home and on the side, and we knew we wanted a career change, and we knew we wanted to do something for ourselves, and that sort of sparked, the interest in donuts specifically, because donuts are just like a really fun, sort of accessible, nostalgic treat for everybody. Like, who doesn't love donuts?
Right.
So we started making donuts, from scratch with traditional recipes inspired. We have done like sourdough donuts and things like that, and learning about like yeast raised donuts from scratch. So that just sort of transitioned into like, why don't we try to do this professionally? And then as that was coming about, I was really interested in starting a vegan business specifically. And so I was, sort of planting the seed that I wanted the bakery or the donut shop to be a vegan shop, and how would that look, and is that something that was feasible? And as we started playing with the recipes and stuff, bread is super basic. Fundamentally, it's like flour, yeast, water, salt, and donuts is sugar. And so it's like, well, that's vegan. So let's just go from there. And then as we were doing it, we're like, oh, this is totally vegan, and it's just like any other donut. It's not a kale donut. It's not a tofu donut. It's just a really good batch-made donut that anyone would like. So we just went from there. And so as we, we were kind of growing the idea for the shop and then putting, the idea out there, we just decided to make it all vegan. And then when we were deciding where to put it, we grew up in Maine, both of us, nearby to where the shop is located in Kittery. We grew up in the Berwicks. We just decided that, that would actually be a really great area that was really ripe for a vegan business. There are a lot of folks who really want it, and they don't want to necessarily go to Portland or go to Boston to, get vegan treats. So we just, said, like, they're ready for it. Let's try it here. And we did. And we're really glad we did.
Yeah. Going back to the decision, when you were thinking about that decision, what sticks out in your mind?
Like what made us decide to pull the trigger specifically?
Yeah, you guys are in finance and marketing. You're doing fine. I would assume, everything's working. Yeah, maybe you don't have things going exactly the way you want it, but you're making a good living. And then all of a sudden you just decide to kind of pull out the safety net and just jump.
Yeah.
That to me is fantastic. The fear that you guys must have had at some point of just like, okay, well, how are we going to make this work? I'm so nervous or whatever. Take me through that part of it.
Yeah. So Ryan and I have always, Ryan and I have been together since we were 18 years old. So we have spent our entire adult lives together, and we have always been very adventurous, and we always sort of follow the philosophy that life is short and you have to, just live your life, whatever that means for you. And so we've always taken risks where we've had very sensible family members try to talk us out of things, and we're like, we're going to go for it. We just have to trust our instincts and do things. Like, we just picked up and moved to San Diego when we were young, and we didn't have jobs and we didn't have housing. We just packed everything in the back of the car, and we're like, you know what, we'll make it work. And we did. And it was probably the most, self-forming experience that we've had, and just like learning about yourself. Mm-hmm. And then we bought, a house in Boston, and everyone thought that was like a crazy idea because we did it in an up-and-coming area, and they thought that we were, crazy for buying in this particular area, and we saw a really good investment, and we went for it, and that ended up working out well for us. And the same thing with the shop. So we always knew we wanted a business of our own. We wanted it to be something that we found really fulfilling. We wanted it to be something that we felt bettered the world in some way, that, we were contributing to a community or contributing in some way. And so we just took the leap. We're like, if not now, then when? And we feel like, even if it didn't work out like any of the other things, that we would land on our feet and figure something else out. So, that's what life's about. It's these learning experiences, and you figure, not everything is going to go perfectly, but it's okay. It kind of makes you stronger. So, or maybe we're just crazy. I don't know.
I love it. That's a great philosophy. So you come home one day, I guess, and you or Ryan just be like, you know what? Let's just open a donut shop in Maine. Is that the way it went? Or
pretty much. That's how we kind of make our decisions. We'll start talking about something like, this could be cool, and then usually there's like a life event that triggers it. One time I got laid off, and we were this was in San Diego. We were thinking about moving to Boston, and I got laid off, and we just decided, like, right that minute, you're like, yep, okay, now's the time. We're just going to pick up and go. And within 2 weeks, we were back, just kind of, within a short amount of time anyway. We had made the decision and then picked up and moved. It's just, we decide to do something, and sometimes it can be like that, where we just come through the door and like, that's the end of my story here, doing this particular thing. I've had a really great marketing career. Ryan had a really great finance and accounting career. We learned so much. We worked for some really awesome businesses and really just learned a lot. And then it just felt like that story kind of was coming to an end, and we wanted to start a new one. And that was pretty much it.
So there wasn't any life-changing thing like you said in San Diego where you got laid off or whatever. It was just one of those things where you're just like, okay, well, let's just go do this.
Pretty much, yeah. When we made the decision, we were just we were at jobs that, we liked, but we didn't necessarily love or didn't necessarily want to take it to the next level. And we had kind of made the decision and just sort of went from there. It wasn't an overnight decision. You don't just open up a business overnight, sort of like moving cities. It
right.
Definitely was a longer process, and we had never done it before, so we had a lot to learn and kind of had to figure out what that meant and where it was going to be and everything. But yeah, we started researching and kind of while we were, working and everything and figuring it out, and sort of just happened. All the timing kind of worked out, and you just sort of follow, signs in your life or whatever you want to call them, and you just kind of feel it out and trust your instincts and go for it.
Now, what was the biggest thing that you've learned starting your business and, changing your whole career?
The biggest thing, I think, is that I think you just really have to be sort of fearless in a way and just trust yourself, because if you start hesitating or hemming and hawing or starting to focus on the negatives, and there are always lots of negatives when you do something like this, you will never do it. You just have to really have a vision, really trust in your vision, and just sort of follow it to fruition. I think that sort of stick-to-itiveness is what's gotten us this far. And when you're opening a business, there are always delays. Things take longer than you think they're going to take. They're more expensive than you think they're going to be. And you just sort of have to make sure that you have a good game plan. Having a great partner is very, very helpful. And then you just kind of plow through it.
Right. Just keep pushing. Just keep...
Yeah, you have to keep pushing. Yeah, that's all you have to do. You can't... it's sometimes tiring or sometimes frustrating, just like anything in life. And you just have to forge ahead, stay positive, focus on the goals, focus on, just, again, that it's the journey, that it's life, that you can't take things too seriously, because you kind of put yourself into the situation and you're doing it for fun. And so you just kind of keep that in mind, and it really helps you get through the challenges.
Yeah. So you guys did a Kickstarter thing. Obviously you got some money to do that, but I mean, like, how did that work?
Yeah, so that was a really fun experience. We had not done any type of Kickstarter campaign, and it was definitely outside of our comfort zone in like the asking friends and family for money thing. So we weren't even sure we were going to do it. And we had money for the business that, we had put in from ourselves. And then, we had a small business loan as well. And then we wanted this to supplement. So it actually worked out really well, and it did a couple of things. It obviously helped to kind of, just boost the cash that's needed when you start a business. But it also really helped to kind of introduce the business to the area and the community. So before you open, you can do some preliminary marketing stuff, but you don't really have a lot to market because you don't even have a product yet or, a shop. So beforehand, when you're telling people about your business and putting it out there and people share it, it's just a really, really good way to kind of build buzz and get people excited about something in the area. And that worked out really well for us. So we found it to be very helpful on a couple of levels.
So what was what's the timeline? Take me through the timeline, but from when you guys decided to do it to when you guys opened up.
Yeah, gosh, it was probably a couple of years. So we got the idea, and it was starting to really take shape as something that was plausible, something that we might actually be able to do. And then goes the research phase, and we're pretty diligent researchers, even though, in some ways we jump into things we also, really want to do our research because we really want something to work when we put our minds to it. So we were trying to figure out the exact area that we wanted our business to go into, and we had explored different, even though, this area, this kind of seacoast area was what we were exploring, we were looking, at different towns and stuff like that when we were initially exploring. So we were sitting on, street corners, just clocking traffic or, people walking by, that sort of thing. And we put a few months of research into things and just the numbers. And also, the vegan element, too, are different areas receptive to that. Is that going to be something that, is going to make or break us? And that was actually one of the more nerve-wracking decisions that we made, because we knew having a vegan business is important to us, but we had to make sure that we were putting ourselves in a community that would be excited about it as well. So we had to make sure that was aligned. And then from there, we, started figuring out the whole money thing. That's always a big part of anything like that. And then finding a location. So once we had the location and we knew that we could do it, it was probably another 9 months or so. In the building and setup part, it's the permitting that takes the longest. So that's sort of out of your hands. You're kind of just waiting on other entities to make decisions or to grant permissions and stuff like that. But once the building started, that happened really quickly, and within 3 months we were doing soft opening stuff. So that was in March, and then by the first week in April we had our grand opening, and the rest was history.
Yeah, what's the response been?
Yeah, so to my my pleasant surprise, it's been a lot warmer than I had anticipated. I mean, I knew that there were going to be certain pockets that were going to be really excited about having a vegan business, but the whole community has been really excited about having us here. We have different demographics. We kind of have this cool cross-section of the community that comes in. We have people that just really like that our donuts are made from scratch, that they just have basic ingredients in there, that they can watch it be made through the window that we have to the kitchen. We get a lot of older folks that come in and say, these donuts taste exactly like the ones my grandmother made. So this is 100 years ago that these donuts are made in a traditional style. So they're like, I haven't tasted anything like this since my childhood. And that's really cool to hear, because, we weren't expecting that necessarily. And then we get, a lot of vegans who travel to come see us, both from, we have folks from this community, and then we have folks from, all over New England that drive to get vegan donuts. So that's super cool. And then sort of this unexpected pocket of people, and probably our fastest growing group, is families with allergies. So we get a lot of parents with children with allergies, because we don't use dairy, we don't use eggs, we don't use peanuts, and we don't use tree nuts in any of our food. And that's been a huge draw for these families. So we've had families come in with kids, and the kids have never had a donut before. So they have this really cool first-time emotional experience. We've had moms crying with watching their kids eat a donut and really enjoying it, which is just such a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, what does that feel like to you? Like when something like that happens?
It's unbelievable, because it wasn't even anything that was at top of mind for me. It's not something. I don't have kids. I don't have kids with allergies. I do have friends with kids with allergies, but neither one of us had really been intimate with that sort of lifestyle before. So I get a lot of calls, and I get a lot of emails from usually moms who ask about ingredients and stuff and bring them in. And it's really cool being part of that whole process where you're introducing them to this. You've been very transparent with them. They bring the kids in, and then they have this sort of emotional, really great experience, and they're building a memory as a family. And just to be there kind of in the background watching it it's sort of transformative. It's something that is new to me, and I'm proud of it and excited about it. So
yeah, that's awesome. It must make you feel so good.
Oh yeah.
Just knowing that, it's not that well, I guess technically you're changing someone's lives, but, just giving them the opportunity to have something that they've never had before, it's got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of like what we hear from the moms when they come in. They're like, it's just really cool to be able to walk into a place and be able to order anything. That's just like not, and even as a vegan, you know what it's like. I know what it's like. You walk into a restaurant and usually you get to pick from like a couple of things, and that's great when they have it. But to be able to walk into a place and just have free reign over the whole menu is just kind of an experience. And then for these kids, can in some cases be like, it's much more extreme if they, do eat something that they, are allergic to or something. So to just be able to walk in and feel safe is just sort of a really cool experience for them.
Right. What does the future look like for you guys right now? I can imagine that, you have some kind of future plans, some kind of outlook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're very excited about the momentum that we've sort of gotten here. Like I said, the reception's been wonderful, and business has been a lot busier than we were even anticipating for the first 6 months. We always wanted to have more than one shop. That was sort of the vision, assuming that it went well here and everything worked out the way that we were anticipating it would. So far, things seem to be quite positive and on track for that. So we would like to get to a place where we can start, thinking about another location. We do have, like I said, we have vegans and folks with allergies and just donut connoisseurs that travel and they want something like this in their community and they don't have it. So, we do have a lot of options for locations that we can explore. So that's sort of on the horizon. And then every day we just try to make this place better. I mean, we're new. I always tell people we're new and we don't know what we're doing. And so everything's an experiment and we're just open to change and we're open to ideas. So, just making sure that our shop here is running as well as it possibly can and that our guests are happy and that we're making the community happy is really important to us too. And our staff too. We want to make sure that our team is proud to be here.
Yeah, one of the things I love is that you're involved in the community. I happened to be there one time and you guys were having what was it, mainly mutts?
Oh, God, yeah.
You had like dogs out there and stuff. And I love that you're, working with the community. What else are you doing?
Yeah, so the dog event that we have pretty much monthly now has been such a crazy hit. We're obviously very animal friendly in our just general personal lives where we would support animal friendly organizations. So when Mainly Mutts reached out to us and wanted to host an adoption event back in the springtime, we were like, absolutely, that's part of the reason why we have a business, so we can do things like this. And that's been a hit. That's I would say it's like a rock concert those days that we have the dogs here, because if you mix dogs and donuts, why wouldn't you go to that? Yeah, it is. It's mayhem in the best way. So those days are really fun. And then we do some other things. We do small sponsorships when community organizations reach out, and they want either, just gift cards and donations and stuff like that. We pretty much say yes, as long as it's aligned with our general mission. And then in terms of other things, we're always looking for new ways to engage with the community. I mean, we are pretty new. We're chamber members, and that always brings, ways to support other organizations too that are doing good work. And we want to support like-minded organizations too. We're members of Sustainable Seacoast, and while that is not necessarily directly giving back to community organizations, it's really important. It's a commitment we make to the community to run a sustainable business from an environmental perspective. So we do things like compost. We don't use, plastics in any of our to-go containers. All of them are compostable. We use renewable energy resources through our energy provider, things like that, so that we can try to make a lower carbon and nitrogen impact on the community. So that's sort of like an indirect way that we support them, to just be involved whenever we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. Finally, could you give me one word to describe how you felt before you became vegan, and then one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
I don't know if this is going to be the best. I don't know if it's the best way to even talk about veganism, but I know how I felt before. All the time was guilty. I was very not aligned, like my eating habits were not aligned with my personal belief system and in terms of like ethics and everything. So I would eat and I would feel guilty because I wasn't aligned. And then after I went vegan, it was like this weight was lifted from my shoulder. I was like, okay, I'm finally living my values, and I just didn't have to feel that strain anymore. So for me, it was just like, I don't know, when you finally just get to know yourself or you finally let go of something, that's what it felt like for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you just remind the listeners where they can find you on Instagram, the web, your shop?
Yeah, absolutely. So my husband and I, we open Lovebirds Donuts in Kittery, Maine. You can visit our website at lovebirdsdonuts.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram. It's just Facebook/Lovebirds Donuts, and Instagram is just at Lovebirds Donuts. So we like to post, photos of donuts and dogs and whatever else we're up to. So it's a good time.
Thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.